campaigns. So my name is Carrie Purse. I'm the founder of Influence Inspire Consulting. I'm here with an amazing panel, and I will let them all introduce themselves.
First up, go ahead.
Liz, my name is Marshall Williams. I'm one of the partners and the CEO of Ad Results Media. We're a specialty advertising firm that concentrates in the audio space. I've been a longstanding radio proponent and have worked in a fantastic multi-year fashion with Lisa Bailey at Sleep Number, originally in radio. But as the universe of audio has changed, we pivoted more into the podcast space and have found it to be an extraordinary method for reaching a great audience, very responsive audience of people who follow audio influencers. So.
Great. I'll introduce myself. My name is Lisa Bailey. I'm Vice President of Media at Sleep Number. And as Marshall said, we worked together many moons. And so I'm excited to be on here with him today. But my sleep IQ score last night was an 85. So that tracks my quality of sleep. So hopefully if anybody else is a Sleep Number fan out there, hope you got better than that. But so I'm glad to be here today.
Hey, I'm Brett Senior. I just figured out this background thing and it makes my hair look wild. I'm a brand director at Procter & Gamble, specifically on Pantene North America. I'd focus on innovation that is, call it the next couple of years out, as well as our responsible beauty platform and our LGBTQ communications and platform.
And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Schaefer. I'm the Group Senior Vice President of Corporate Digital Innovation at Marina Mar Communications. I oversee the corporate and health digital teams in that capacity.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad you figured out the background. I tried, but apparently my laptop is too old, so I can't even use it. I'm very jealous. Okay, so with that, let's not waste any more time and we'll dive right into the panel. So, when you guys hear people say influencer marketing, most folks think about Instagrammers or YouTubers that partner with brands to promote their products or services. But as the discipline of influencer marketing really matures, an increasing number of marketers are looking to activate all different types of influencers, including third-party credentialers and even personality-driven media. So how do you think about this broader definition of influence? And really, what is the potential that it unlocks for marketers?
I think when we look at the evolution of influence and influencers, we need to look at the evolution of earned media. That just a few decades ago, we had newspapers, TV stations, radio stations, and as communicators, we were really comfortable with that model. And now with publishing and sharing content being so democratized, all you need is a social media handle or a GoDaddy account, and you can enter the media conversation on just about anything. So that means influencers have evolved as well. So what was once held within a few media outlets, then that sort of shifted to involvement from celebrity spokespeople, and now influencers are provide so many diverse channels and methods to reach either mass market audiences or sort of niche subcultures based on interest. And so what I find really interesting is that we can classify influencers not just by their audience quantity, but by the quality relative to the need of the goal. And that really sets an amazing tone for everything in 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would add on, for us and our brand, talk about a low interest category, right? We're in a very low interest category of mattresses, and we're evolving from there. And we have a complex offering, and how do we talk about it? And for us, we've always defined influencers pretty broadly because we just are looking for those that add credibility to what we're selling, getting away from Sleep Number is a gimmicky brand. And we've really been able to, through our influencers and through our level of credibility across different channels, have been able to get away from that and really talk technology, innovation, and really our newest pivot to health and wellness through through quality sleep. So we look at influencers in all different ways, but podcasts are a new one coming in, especially over the last year, that have really, really taken off for us.
Yeah, to expand on that, I think the influencer is a relatively modern term in the social media space. That's most of the understanding of how the word's used. But influencer started out, in my perspective, again, audio guy, as radio hosts who used to go on the air and say, this is a great product, you have to use it. That's wonderful. And what's happened is it's manifested from radio into the audio space as a spoken word medium where, this person who has an audience, and Mike, you said this when we discussed earlier, you said an influencer, someone who has an audience that they could motivate. And podcasting has truly become that, the sort of next iteration of that from an audio standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we all benefit by not just thinking about influencers as, high reach social accounts, but how do we influence our audience and really use all the tools that are available to us? And I think all of us agree that podcasters are a tremendous asset to that. So let's dig in a little bit more, specifically. So certainly, one of the reasons that influencer marketing has grown so significantly, it's now a $10 billion industry, is because people simply trust other people, right? They like to hear personal experiences or anecdotes, even reviews on how a brand or service fits into their life through the context of somebody else's story. So talk to us a little bit about how podcasters have been able to supercharge personal storytelling for brands and really influence their listeners.
Yeah, let me hop on my pedestal here. I think that podcasts really are one of the last mediums where you have someone's undivided attention. If you think about TV, as soon as an ad comes on, it's very easy to pull out your phone. And as you're on your phone, those ads are running, you're getting Instagram ads and you're scrolling right past those. And I think there's merit in those mediums and purpose, but you do have a bit of a divided attention. Whereas when you have podcasts, you have this audience that trusts a host and is specifically tuning into that niche topic and that host because they trust them in their opinions and the story that they have to tell. And rightfully so. We've encountered a lot of different podcast hosts in running ads for Pantene that are super discerning. And before they want to work with us, they have a bunch of different questions on like, okay, well, are you cruelty free? Is it safe for this type of hair? Does it work on old hair, young hair? And so it almost comes to a point, if your product's right for the host, then there's an implication that it can work for the audience that's tuning in. All of that to say, podcasts have audiences that are really more receptive to brand messages and storytelling, which then enables richer storytelling.
Yeah, we see the same exact thing. We're very much about product benefits, and they're dry and boring. And when you have a podcaster that has a very engaged audience and they can tell it through their lens and tell their story, it just adds a whole new level. And that has worked really well for us. We feed just a little bit, just like some data or something that might be interesting. And then the podcaster takes it for us and just really tells that story. And I'll use the word authentic way. But that's what's so great about that media for us.
Yeah, and we found this. The nature of podcasting is it's an opt-in medium. Okay, and so it's the listener is truly the person who says, well, I'll make this decision versus radio, which is served to them. I'll make this decision. I'll tune into this. And as they stay engaged in this space, they build trust. It could start from day one, but the trust is a big word here. And trust runs across a number of different elements. It could be that you're talking about somebody who entertains you, or somebody who educates you, or somebody who makes you happy or sad or frustrated or whatever it may be, but you trust what they say. So when they lean into a product like Pantene and they get to know what the elements of your product are, Brett, and then they tell their audience about it, that connection takes place between that person who's selected to listen to that and the benefits of that product. And it really registers. We've, as mentioned, have worked with Sleep Number for a long time, and we have, without creating copy, come up with some of the best, iterative language about how great that product is, because the host of the podcast just loves it. And that's a connection that's very difficult, difficult to get in any other medium.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so interesting that we're having this conversation today about podcasts being such a personal medium. But you think about the two brands we have here today, hair and sleep are two of the most personal things you can think of. And so it just lends itself incredibly well to this type of influencer. So I think that, that takes us to the opportunity to talk a little bit more specifically about some of the most successful campaigns you have run with influencers. So talk to us about the ones that include kind of that broad swath of influencers that we talked about at the beginning. So credentialers or, different types of influencers, but also talk to us about the role that podcasters specifically played in that overall strategy.
Yeah, Carrie, like you said, hair is very specific and unique to every person. And a lot of people believe that. I think I just proved it. My hair doesn't work with these backgrounds. So considering that and like a brand that's as widespread as Pantene, it becomes difficult to convince a consumer that like your big brand is right for them and their unique hair, right? And then we also have to consider the legacy of a hair brand that's 80 years old and all of the baggage that comes with that. So like back to this idea of Instagram or TV ads, you can't convincingly tell someone everything that you need to tell them to convince them from like where they are in this stage of consideration. So we've run a ton of different campaigns on podcasts. I think our most successful was for our collection nutrient blends. As a brand with a lot of baggage, we had to authentically overcome tons and tons of barriers. So some of them are like very ingredient specific. Consumers want things that are more natural or more effective. They're also looking to avoid things like sulfates, parabens, dyes. And to hear that from the brand that comes with that baggage, it's a bit difficult to convince a consumer that's already deselected from you. But when you have a podcast host be able to speak to these different things, actually experience and use the product and tell their audience about it, you can overcome a lot of these things. And there's many different ways to like go into it, so many different facets of a shampoo. One of our most interesting cases was using Crime Junkies to talk about this nutrient blends collection. And it sounds so funny to use a crime podcast to speak to hair, but it's two women that have awesome hair and their audience knows that. They have very different needs and they were able to use different collections, speak to that. And so it's not, specific to the listener, but it's that much more relevant. So that's something that's specific. And then there's also times where we tap into podcasters that have broader reach or more exciting versus like very sciencey and detailed. And that helps us hit more consumers with a new, exciting, check this out type message. So there's a plethora of different ways in which makes it a really, really exciting medium.
Yeah, I love that. Ashley Flowers, who's the host of Crime Junkies, is we've been in this space a long time, so I've noticed that she first started out. And I love her. I could just see her getting completely engaged with your product and talking about attributes and features. And it smells great. And just I can absolutely see that. So that's a good pickup. And who knew that True Crime was going to have this reach into a young female segment? I mean, I would have never thought that, but it's enormous. Ashley will go to a theater event pre-COVID, and 3,000-4,000 people would show up to see her. And so that's the kind of loyal following she's built. Anyway. So, as mentioned, Ad Results Media has worked with Sleep Number for a number of years now with Lisa, and they've gone through a number of initiatives over time. So, they were talking about the broad swath of influencers that exist in the podcast space. Well, Sleep Number is the official health and wellness sleep wellness sponsor of the NFL. Okay. And Lisa, correct me if I said that wrong, but anyway, that's the essence of it. And so we were able to utilize that swath of podcaster in order to help them go down that path. They're also health and wellness as a category is extremely important to them. And because of the breadth of podcasting, I pulled up some data today. And because podcasting oftentimes gets the sense that, well, it's kind of niche and there's no scale and so on and so forth to big brands. There are more than 2,008,000 podcasts active right now. Okay, effective this morning. And that's a growth of like 50,000 podcasts in the last month. So there's real scale here. So when you lean into that health and wellness category that Sleep Number has said, hey, this is important to us. We want to reach these people, whether they be fitness experts or sleep experts or what have you. There's a tremendous amount of scale just in that vertical, just in that niche that we can reach into. I was talking with somebody this morning and I asked them their fastest growing podcast on their platform, Heather Osgood at True Native Media. And she said, Sleep Meditations for Women gets over 1 million downloads a month. That's a lot of people who are opting in to get that kind of content. So there's real scale in this space, and it can be as targeted as you'd like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. These are such incredible examples of, just the power of people being relatable. I've often heard listening to a podcast being compared to sitting in a room listening to your friends talking, which was something so desirable during the last year. And so I think just, hearing these examples really brings it to life. The next question, it's a funny one. Marshall says niche and I say niche. And it's always one of those like ongoing debates about how you pronounce this word. So this next question is focused on niche or niche audiences. Pick your pronunciation. But one of the most notable similarities between traditional social media influencers and podcasters is that there's literally a podcast or an influencer account for every imaginable niche interest. So share with us about how reaching audiences with these niche interests impacts your influencer marketing strategy. And then also talk to us about the role that personal relationships play in making these efforts both meaningful and long-term.
Yeah, we work extremely close with our influencers and our podcasters to make sure that our values and messages are truly aligned. Like if someone doesn't believe in the things that Pantene as a brand does, then it's not a good match and it's not going to resonate with the audience that they've built trust with. We have a few different initiatives where we go super in depth in trying to educate our audience from like sustainability programs and where we are driving like conversations around closed loop packaging and a reduction of waste and energy. That is very kind of, it's very niche to choose my side of that battle. To talking again about like the ingredients and the science of like why something works, why it's in, why it's out, and really explaining that. Not everyone wants to necessarily hear and like sit and hear about those things. And so working with the right podcast, the right host, finding that niche place where your message is going to be resonant is really important. We've also found spaces to talk about non-product messages. So we have this responsible beauty platform, and a leg of that, as I mentioned earlier, is our LGBTQ platform. And we speak to the role that hair plays for the community. It's really fascinating. For instance, 60% of people change their hair when they come out. And it has a huge impact on their identity, the way they feel they express themselves, the way that they're perceived by the world. And that's not something you can really talk about in a Facebook post or a 15-second ad, but you can have an interesting conversation through podcast hosts. And so these messages aren't right for all different audiences. I don't think anyone has the attention span to listen to all of that from one single hair brand, but podcasts have become the perfect way to be the right worm in the right ear right time, right place, if you will.
Yeah. So we're in a golden age of digital content. And Marshall, the fact that you just said that there's over 2 million podcasts and 50,000 more every month, that's crazy. I'm old enough to remember when cable TV came out and how we went from 4 channels to 50. And now there's a channel, there's a podcast, a show for whatever interest you have. And Carrie, to the question about relationships, because there are so many niches, I'll fall on that side. That also means that there is a tremendous community that comes with each show. That if you're listening to a show that interests you, you might have thought, you may have gone your entire life thinking, oh my God, I thought I was the only person interested in X. But it turns out there's thousands, if not millions of people that have the same interest, or at least curious in something I'm interested in too. So then the relationship of that community between the listeners, but also between the host and the community, is so trusted because you're sharing that narrow interest. I think there's so much power because of that shared experience, that everyone sort of found each other on the same virtual campfire, and that community has a lot of power when you market to them authentically.
Definitely. So Lisa, do you have any thoughts on, basically targeting niche interests, or, the role that podcasters have been able to help really, supercharge your brand in that aspect?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as we look to health and wellness as a key area of focus, that's, obviously we can go and target that, right? We can go target that, but everybody sleeps, so even just having a broad, going on to several different genres, we still hit those people who are interested in health and wellness. So it does both for us. It allows us to target more specifically, try different messages, see how that pulls through. We can track the traffic, we can track it to our website, which is great. And they tell their story. Again, if they're telling you what your sleep number setting is every time they get on, or what their sleep IQ score, there's just a little bit of that personal touch that again brings the customer or the listener in and engages with us and tries to understand why is this person telling me about that, or why are they talking about what their sleep number setting was versus their partner's sleep number setting, and why is that important? And so it just allows them to unpack the story for us, and it allows us to then find those different audiences that resonate differently with different messages as well.
Yeah, I think, it's the stats about the, explosion of podcasts over the last year has just really been tremendous. And, I love this discussion around people finding their community through media, right? So like it was bloggers, right? You could, or Tumblr communities, even you could find people who had the same wacky, obscure interests that you do, and influencers, represent that beautifully. You can find, a community, and I think podcasting is so interesting because it is personal and private. It's not on the internet for everybody to see, but you are part of this crew that really follows these podcasters and welcomes them kind of, into your home. So it's incredibly interesting. And I think, has a great deal of potential to reach those niche targets. I think niche one, Marshall, but we're not counting.
It did. Okay, I'm changing it from now until forever. Niche.
We're not counting. It's okay. Okay, so both influencer content and podcast listenership, as we mentioned today, have seen a significant uptick in consumption during this past year of the pandemic. So how has this shift in consumer behavior impacted your channel planning decisions? And have you seen this impact the performance of your media? So both from an effectiveness and an efficiency perspective.
Yeah, I can chime in first. It definitely has. I mean, podcasts we keep on finding new ways to spend more money. It's all good because we're seeing great returns, because again, we can track those results. And we don't think it's going to slow down. You know, it's going to be, it's now just finding the right genres that, again, are authentic to our customer and what they're looking for. So right message to right target audience to right mindset, all of that is a trifecta with podcast. And so we see it as a growth opportunity for us in the audio space for sure. And we'll continue to invest there as long as we're seeing a strong ROI like we are today.
Great.
You know, to further that, broadcasting is when it was first around 4 or 5, well, it's actually more like 10 or 11 years ago when the first iterations of it came about. But the tech behind it was, in terms of attribution and determining effectiveness, which was part of your question, Carrie, was, okay, so we use a media code and we ask that listener to go to the website on one of our DTC brands, or if a retail brand like Lisa has mentioned that you heard about it on this podcast at the store. A little bit archaic and certainly not as clear a picture as we'd like to see, but the podcast space is really modified of late to where you can now install a pixel in the RSS feed of a particular podcast and a corresponding pixel without divulging any private personal information, to where you can determine what that person who downloads that podcast does when they go to your website or what have you. We're even working on some tech where, fingers crossed, we can find out if people actually go into a retail location. That's probably down the road a little bit, but the tech that's come about of late is pretty good in terms of showing the effectiveness of podcast advertising. And comparatively speaking against what we've seen in the past, again, media codes and so on and so forth, again, a little more of a less modern version of attribution, it's showing a real significant increase in performance. And so our performance-minded clients are seeing great results. They're very happy with what they're seeing in the podcast space. So I think that it's like Lisa said, it's allowing her the ability to look at the data and go, yeah, this is a channel that we should invest in more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, anytime there's an explosion of inventory and competition, it's great for efficiency, right? So I think this is a great time to get into the podcast advertising space. Okay, so we're on to our last question before we hop into the Q&A, but it's a good one. So this digs into a little bit more of the creative process. So another striking similarity between social influencer marketing and podcast advertising, with host live read specifically, is the need to give the creator or host a little creative flexibility to really make the message and the content their own, because authenticity cannot be faked. So what is your philosophy with regard to co-creation of content and letting go of full creative control?
You know, Carrie, you said authenticity can't be faked. It's also the most critical aspect. Brett, you mentioned earlier on about people having full attention when they're listening to a podcast. I think what's really amazing is, like Marshall, I came up through radio and love radio. Radio is so wonderful, but also has really strict formatting that the ad breaks are this long and can fit in this window. With podcasting, the rules are out the window. So I've listened to podcasters spend 6 minutes talking about dog food, and it's not a pet podcast. And I've listened to that same podcast have that same conversation, I think 10 different times, and it's different every time because it's what they're feeling about that brand and their pets. Then I also look at Work Life by Adam Grant, one of my favorite podcasts, and all of the ads are sponsored segments. And instead of just having a 3-minute ad break, it's part of the show that is clearly defined as sponsored and paid for, but it has that same journalistic creative spin. So podcasts allow this really authentic pull through that trades on the trust that we talked about earlier, that sense of community and that relationship that they have, to be more creative and be more high impact in what that relationship could be. It's not just fast forwarding through a commercial or skipping it. You can do that or you can't, but the authenticity is unreal what you can do with podcast.
Great. Lisa, what have you found to be successful?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I would say for us, we have so much to say. We've had to really, really try not to just put it all in all these different talking points, and what we found really works is like we try to do a setup for the season or whatever, what we want to talk about, whether it's be spring, we don't, whatever the season is. Then we'll want to make sure that they hit on some of the feature benefits of why Sleep Number and why the Sleep Number smart bed. But then we give fun facts, data that we get so that they have some fun with it. Like, hey, we're sleeping better in Minnesota than they are in Michigan, or whatever the data point is. And then they play around with it. And then they have a dialogue too. So Mike, to your point, it goes on and on and on. So it's not 30 seconds, 60 seconds. It allows them to just really have fun with the brand. And again, that just builds that confidence and trust that it's a brand that I want to aspire to. So that's how we've been using it.
Great.
Yeah, to the radio is you get copy points and you write copy. We try and generate copy for our clients in a very conversational fashion because we are embarking on a journey with that personality to discuss with their audience what they're doing. Podcasting is a little different because it's podcasting. It's all opt-in. And sometimes the content is it can be a little bit spicier just because you never know what they're going to talk about. Dax Shepard's a prime example. Love Dax. Okay, Dax is a very honest guy, very transparent. I think that's why he's successful. But Dax can use a few, colorful terms. And so we have to, we guide him there. This is where the guides, these are where the out of bounds markers are. Let's make sure we stay within the out of bounds markers. And we try and do that with every one of the shows that we work with. And we probably are, in a few thousand shows on a weekly basis here. So we're very conscientious about what our brands that we work with want, where their out of bounds markers are, and how to, Brett, you mentioned that you actually had talked to a number of these people. That's sort of mandatory from our book standpoint to try and connect with them directly so that we can give them those out of bounds markers, but still say, have fun with it, enjoy it, tell people how you really feel about this, because that's the connection we're looking for. That you, Mr. Podcaster, you have an audience that likes you and trusts you and laughs with you or cries with you or whatever it may be. Tell them about this product that you've discovered that's great, that'll make their lives better. And that's why we see these kind of performance metrics that we have. It's this is a special space here.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I think, whether they are traditional, regular social influencers or celebs or podcasters, being able to brief within a flexible framework. So it's just as you said, what are your key messages? What are your absolute mandatories? But really just giving the personality the creative freedom to make it their own, and make sure you're picking the right partners, right? Like, don't ask somebody to not be themselves. So if you don't like colorful language, maybe go find a different podcast partner. It's all good. It's all good. So, I want to thank you guys so much. This was, I think, a really great, lively panel. I hope everyone else agrees. I actually see the Q&A widget here populating with some really interesting questions. So if we want to kind of switch over to the Q&A portion of the show, I'll just go through and kind of ask some of the key questions of the audience, and whoever wants to answer the specific question, just pop in. So the first one I thought was great. What are your thoughts on how mainstream influencer marketing differs from podcasts in terms of the feeling of intrusion?
I can take that one. I think if you're looking at influencers on, say, like Instagram or TikTok, a lot of times I feel like consumers are following them for one particular thing, and it varies. Following them for their style or the way their hair looks or the travels that they do. But it's that one particular thing. And then if you throw Febreze in, to use a P&G example, Febreze with a travel influencer, it's more likely to feel a bit weird and I think intrusive was the word they used.
Mhm.
and the question. Whereas podcasters, you're tuning in to hear their opinion and their storytelling about whatever topic. And I feel like when you use a podcaster versus other mediums, you're opting in to hear their opinion and the way they storytell about a particular brand, even if it's a little out of the category, like hair and crime.
Aaron, I love that. We ask for a process where we let the personality do these, the host of the show do these ads in their own context. So we ask them to weave it into the content. And sometimes it's fluid, and sometimes they do, frankly, they're pretty creative. They're already good talkers in the first place. So their ability to weave it into content is pretty good. And, we've got, since we do a lot of business with Barstool Sports, which is a large podcast.
Oh,
Hey, Marshall.
yeah, I think your audio is kind of going in and out a little bit.
Huh. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. It's the I'm in Texas, and the guy picks today to come cut the yard outside our building.
Oh.
So yeah, I know. Anyways, it's probably picking up that static in the background. I'm trying to keep it out of the way here. Anyway, we do a lot of business with Molson Coors as a brand, and also Barstool Sports. You can obviously see the symmetry between that audience and Molson Coors products. But the way it's woven into content, the way the teams there at Barstool Sports weave it into their various content or what have you, it's really magical. And that's where there's no interruption. Brett, like you said, there's no real contextual interruption there. It's very fluid, and it's a wonderful medium that allows us to be fluid in the style of advertising we're in.
Yeah.
One more point on that. It's the difference between passive versus active that when you're scrolling through Instagram, like you've opted in to follow people except for the ads that you're being served, but you're just sort of scrolling through and you're like, I wonder who's next on the feed, which still has immense power and is a huge part of the marketing mix. Podcasts, you are opting in not just to subscribe to the show, to download the episode, and then to make the investment of your time to listen to that episode. So you're in a different headspace when you're listening to a podcast, and probably at a different level of being ready to absorb different information.
Yeah, no, it's such a good point. And I sympathize with your ambient noise, Marshall. I live in Brooklyn, and I'm surprised at how well Brooklyn has behaved today without the sirens. I feel like I'm constantly putting myself on mute. Okay, so let's dig into the next question. I think this is another great one. How do you engage with large podcast personalities and their often active audience throughout the partnership? So if it's not just a one and done, right? How do you continue this momentum, and how do you potentially kind of re-engage or continue to activate their audience?
I can jump in on that one. So for us, we're constantly trying to feed new information so it doesn't get stale, because you're right, the audience will get pretty tired of it pretty quickly. So it's constantly refreshing. And we have those personal conversations with the podcasters too, just to kind of talk about what we're trying to get across, talk about anything new at Sleep Number, try to get them excited about it, and they sleep on our product. So you can kind of have that dialogue with them about it too, so they get some excitement about it. But it really is about keeping their what they talk about fresh and exciting.
Great. Excellent.
Anyone? Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean that constant. I think it's important you stay in touch with them, and it's important that you feed them innovation. Sleep Number's done a great job of innovating over the course of years. We've got some of our personalities with Sleep Number that have been on 10 years or so, and so talking about sleeping on the same bed for 10 years is going to be boring. But what they've done, and we provide this information, is continue to update with new innovations that Sleep Number has. They've got a Sleep IQ product, which is an app-based program on the phone that keeps track of how well you sleep, We update them on any kind of iterations that take place relative to new product lines that come out and that kind of thing. It just keeps things fresh. Because if it's one and done, that's one thing. But if you're doing this over the course of time, and you should be, because it's an ever expanding audio space, you've got to continue to update them. Brett, I'm sure you do the same with new products, new innovations, packaging changes, the whole smash. I'm sure that's part of your lexicon.
Yeah, we take a very similar approach to how Lisa was describing it. We try to pull in more people behind the brand to engage with the podcasters. We have our scientists, our different communications people, our different designers come in and speak to them and give them interesting information, because the product changes, but only so often. But we have so much information, just years and years of science, constantly engaging consumers, learning really interesting insights. That's part of why people tune into podcasts, to learn, to hear something new. And so we want to help provide that from like a brand lens as well.
Yeah. If I had $1 for every time somebody's like, guess what I learned in this podcast yesterday? You know, it is. It's like I don't know if it's like going back to school for grown-ups, but it is such an interesting medium, and everybody learns something new. So another question here, more, this is more generally about how even to get started, is that, does podcasting have a high or low barrier to entry? And, I think we can discuss this from a cost perspective, from a creative development perspective, from, measurement. What is your opinion on kind of getting started?
I'll take a quick stroll on the strategic side. And I'll turn it over to the much smarter panelists to talk through the activation of the pull through. I think podcasting and work with influencers let you go places that you can't go as a brand yourself. And I think you're renting or leasing the access to that audience, and hopefully building a long-term relationship to reach those people in a targeted, I think we even said effective and efficient way. So I think strategically, it makes a lot of sense to go with podcasts. I would say creating your own podcast, there's a mess of them out there already, but there may be a niche that your brand hasn't can talk to authentically through an owned podcast that hasn't been out there yet. But in terms of the marketing side, I'll turn it over to everyone else.
Barrier to entry from a content standpoint, it's still relatively low. The original podcasters could do it in their garage with a laptop. It's a little more sophisticated than that now, and to produce high quality stuff with background music, et cetera, it's a little more expensive, but you can buy podcast starter kits for a few $100s. So that content side is to build a network takes time, takes energy, takes social media presence, because that's truly, connective tissue with other podcasters is also important to get to scale. So it's not a heavy lift. It's obviously with the level of growth in the space, like 50,000 new podcasts in the last 4 or 5 weeks, plenty of people entering the space, and you never know who's going to be what the next segment is. I mean, true crime, nobody saw that 2 years ago. Now Ashley Flowers has got an industry built around it now at Crime Junkies. So,
yeah, it's such an interesting time to be able to structure some test and learns too. I think that's, one of the best ways as a marketer to really embrace a new channel is, have a very focused objective. Like, what do you want to accomplish? What are your testing parameters? And then, execute that first campaign with podcasting to then decide, is this going to be a real workhorse channel for you that you're going to want to invest in further? So it's absolutely, you can kind of, start small and learn along the way and really refine your strategy.
Right.
And I would just, Marshall, I could add in too, like for Sleep Number, obviously we want them sleeping on our beds. So there's an investment, they'll be sleeping on our beds and we want to give them time to experience it. But there are certain times during the year, like during the holiday season and things like that, where we will like send pillows, something that's less just to get them experiencing and get them closer to the brand. So just those type of things are those super high touch things make a difference in how they tell your story. But yeah, so you can do it in a bunch of different ways, and you can look at it seasonally. You can look at it for the long run. There's lots of different ways of getting into the space.
Right. And from an advertising standpoint, it's still pretty affordable. I mean, the CPMs are still relatively low, and there's inventory available. And it's at scale. That 2 years ago, people said, "Oh, there's no scale there," but now, I mean, I think from a monthly active users, it's bigger than all the social media platforms except for Facebook. Podcasting actually has more active monthly users than Twitter, Instagram, the whole smash, and growing fast. So.
Yeah,
All right,
the
guys,
scale
I've
is
got
definitely
to cut it all out. I'm getting the move from my team here. So Lisa, Marshall, Brett, Mike, Carrie, thank you all. This was an awesome session. I think we're 2 away from having like the full like tic-tac-toe board here.
Yeah.
Very, very impressive, Carrie. You definitely maneuvered through all of this. So thank you so much for bringing everyone to the table, and thank you all for participating today.
awesome.
Enjoyed
Thanks,
it.
everyone.
Thank you.
Great
Yeah.
panel. Thank you,
Bye.
guys.
All right. All right. Well, we're at our second to last panel of the day, but we are turning it up. We are just making it better and better. I am now thrilled to introduce a very special guest. We're joined by Allie Webb, the founder of Drybar. She's a multi-time entrepreneur. She has a new company called Beckett and Quill, and also has a very cool massage company called